Imagine, if you will, the absolute pinnacle of human cleanliness and precision. We're standing in what we might call Reason's laboratory.
Okay.
It's a clean room, white walls, stainless steel. The air is scrubbed of every particle of dust, and it is illuminated by this harsh, unforgiving white light of pure empiricism.
It's an impressive room. It really represents the height of our ability to understand the material world.
It really is. And in this room, we have the most advanced tools humanity has ever forged. We have, say, the Large Hadron Collider humming in one corner.
Sure.
We've got a live data feed from the James Webb Telescope splashed across a massive screen. We have electron microscopes that can peer into the very fabric of matter. And right in the center of this room, there is a sensor.
A sensor? What kind of sensor?
A high-tech multi-spectrum sensor. And this sensor has a single very specific job. It is sweeping the room. It scans the star clusters. It probes the microscopic depths of the cell. It's listening to the cosmic background radiation. It is looking for an anomaly.
A signature.
A signature. Specifically, it is looking for God.
And what does the sensor say?
That's the thing. Imagine the sound.
Okay.
Beep, beep, beep. It's rhythmic, clinical, almost lonely. The screen is flat. The reading is 0. It scans and it finds silence. Just that steady, empty beep.
And for many, many people, that silence is heavy. It's conclusive.
It's crushing. This is the starting point for so many of us today. We're standing in Reason's laboratory. We are ready to believe, we aren't hostile, we aren't angry, but we have a condition.
A prerequisite.
A prerequisite. We say, show me, if God interacts with this cosmos, if there really is a composer behind this reality, surely he must leave a fingerprint that my scanner can pick up.
But the scanner just keeps on beeping.
And for the modern skeptic, that silence is deafening. It's not just a lack of noise, it's a verdict.
It feels like a verdict of absence. The logic is simple. If I can't measure it, it's not there.
Exactly. But what if, and this is the pivot point of our entire deep dive today, what if the silence isn't an absence of sound? What if it's a failure of frequency?
That is the core question we are exploring. Because today we are diving into a really fascinating clash of worldviews. We're looking at the book The Quran and Atheism by J.R. Ahmed.
Right.
And the argument here suggests that if you are standing in that lab waiting for a single isolated beep to prove the existence of a musician, you are missing the massive reality that you are already standing inside the symphony.
So the music isn't a glitch in the system. The music is the system.
Exactly. The system itself is the message.
So our mission today is to really unpack this. We're going to explore the tension between what we're calling the atheist challenge, which demands the empirical, verifiable data, and the Quranic response, which points to something completely different. It points to Ayat, or signs.
It's a roadmap that takes us from philosophy to hard science. We're going to look at what's called the category error, this idea of trying to measure the metaphysical with physical tools.
Which is a huge piece of this puzzle.
It is. And we're also going to tackle the heavy emotional stuff, the argument from Divine Hiddenness, which, is a massive stumbling block for people.
And then we are going to take a tour of these signs. And I have to say, even as someone who reads a lot of this stuff, some of these examples from the source material are... they're wild.
Quite specific.
They really are. We're talking about embryology, deep sea oceanography, the physics of the Big Bang, all framed as evidence not of a God of the gaps, but of a God of the mechanics.
It's a journey from the microscope to the telescope.
Yeah.
And then maybe inward to the human heart.
So let's go back to that lab. Let's start with the empty lab. This is, the stronghold of the modern atheist argument. And to be fair, we have to acknowledge that this isn't a foolish position, not at all. It's a position built on a massive track record of success.
It is. We absolutely have to give credit where credit is due. The scientific method is arguably the most successful tool humanity has ever invented for understanding the physical world.
No question.
Methodological naturalism, this basic assumption that we should look for natural causes for natural phenomena, has given us everything. Antibiotics, the internet, space travel. It's doubled our life expectancy. It lights up the dark corners of the world.
Right. And historically, religion used to live in those dark corners. The source material talks about this God of the gaps anxiety.
This is a crucial concept to understand because it frames the entire debate. Historically, if we didn't know what caused lightning, we said, well, Zeus is angry or Thor is throwing his hammer.
It's a placeholder for our ignorance.
It's a placeholder. Exactly.
Yeah.
If we didn't know how life began or why people got sick, we said it's a spirit or God breathed it. God was the explanation for the things we didn't understand.
He lived in the gaps in our knowledge.
Yes. But science is a relentless process of gap filling. As the light of science gets brighter, those shadows, those gaps, they get smaller and smaller.
We figured out atmospheric electricity, so we didn't need Zeus. We figured out germ theory, so we didn't need demons to explain disease.
Exactly. The gaps are closing. And the logic, from a skeptical point of view, is pretty straightforward. If your God only lives in the gaps of human ignorance, then your God is an endangered species.
Every time a scientist publishes a paper explaining a new mechanism,
Your God gets a little smaller. Eventually, the gaps close completely, and poof, God vanishes.
the source text uses this great analogy, the scientific method as a lamp. It shines brightly on the mechanisms of the universe. It reveals what looks like a completely closed system.
A self-sustaining system.
Right. Naturalism suggests that nature is a machine that winds itself. You don't need a supernatural weaver to explain why the rain falls anymore. We know about evaporation and condensation and atmospheric pressure.
A whole water cycle.
So the atheist stands in the light of this lamp, looks around, sees no divine shadow cast by the machinery, and concludes no one is there.
But here's the nuance that the source material brings up, and it's critical. The demand isn't just for evidence in a broad philosophical sense. The skeptic in the lab is asking for something very specific.
They want hard data.
They want traceable, measurable, empirical proof. They want a ripple in the data. They want the laws of physics to be suspended, broken in a way that can only be explained by a deity. They want God to show his work on their spreadsheet.
They want the beep.
They want the beep. And when they don't get it, they don't just stop there. They move to a very powerful philosophical argument. It's called the argument from Divine Hiddenness.
And this one hits hard. I find this one it's not just logical, it's deeply emotional. We're referencing the work of philosopher J.L. Schellenberg here.
Yeah.
And the core question is just so simple and so profound. If God is perfect love, why is he so shy?
It's the problem of the non-resistant non-believer.
Let's unpack that term because it's important. We're not talking about the person who hates God. We aren't talking about the person who is actively running away from truth because they want to live some kind of hedonistic lifestyle.
No, this isn't about rebellion.
No, we're talking about, let's call him Dave.
Okay, Dave.
Dave is a good guy. Dave genuinely wants to know the truth. He reads the theology books. He looks at the stars at night. He asks the big questions. He is open. He is receptive. He says, God, if you are there, tell me. Show me something.
And he hears.
Nothing. The beep is flat. The line is dead. So the question becomes, if God loves Dave and wants a relationship with him, why make it a cosmic guessing game?
Why not just show up? Why not write, I am here in the stars, so Dave doesn't have to live in this state of uncertainty?
It seems like a reasonable request.
It does, and it's a devastating critique if you accept the premise. Schellenberg argues that a perfectly loving God wouldn't allow reasonable non-belief to exist. The fact that there are millions, maybe billions of Daves out there, people who are open to belief but remain unconvinced due to a lack of what they consider sufficient evidence, that fact is treated as empirical data.
It's evidence of absence. The lack of a clear signal is itself a signal.
A signal of absence, yes.
And the source material connects this to the problem of evil, too. It's almost like another form of empirical data collection.
How so?
Well, the lab sensor, our metaphorical sensor, it definitely picks up suffering. It picks up pain, disease, natural disasters. It detects the bleeding gash of the world, as the source puts it.
Right. The sensor sees the earthquake. It sees the pediatric oncology ward. It can quantify the suffering?
It can quantify the suffering, but it detects no helper. So you have the clear, measurable presence of pain and the absolute absence of a visible rescuer.
And the logical conclusion, if you're stuck inside the empty lab, is that the rescuer doesn't exist.
That is the view from the empty lab. It's consistent, it's logical, and it's based on the best tools available in that room. But here is where the pivot happens. Here is where the source material steps in and says, wait a minute, we have a problem, not with the reality, but with the tools.
This is the category error.
Explain that concept. What exactly is a category error?
Okay, imagine you have a ruler, a high-precision, laser-calibrated ruler. It is the perfect tool for measuring length. It can measure a table, a building, a coastline with incredible accuracy.
Okay, best ruler in the world.
The best. Now imagine I ask you to use that ruler to measure the weight of a thought.
The weight of a thought. You can't. It's a nonsensical question.
It is. Or use that ruler to measure the color of a mathematical concept, like the number 7.
Again, impossible.
Or, to use the source's analogy, use a physical ruler to measure the depth of a dream.
You can't. The ruler would just pass right through it. You'd get a reading of 0, and you would conclude, based on your tool, that the dream has no depth. Not because it doesn't, but because the tool is in the wrong category for the object being measured.
Exactly. You're trying to measure a non-physical reality with a physical instrument. Science, by its very nature, probes the how. It deals with the mechanistic flow of matter and energy. It is fantastic at that.
The best tool we have for it.
The best. But it is constitutionally mute on the why. It cannot touch the metaphysical. Demanding that a thermometer measure justice is absurd. Demanding that the scientific method, which is designed exclusively to study the natural world measure of the supernatural being is, well, it's a category error.
So God, by definition, is outside the closed system of the lab. The lab was built to measure things inside the system.
If God is the author of the laws of physics, he isn't subject to them in a way that you can trap in a test tube. It's like you can study a painting all day long. You can analyze the pigments, the chemical composition of the paint, the brushstrokes, the weave of the canvas, but you will never find the painter inside the painting.
Because a painter isn't made of paint.
The painter isn't made of paint. It seems so obvious when you see it like that, doesn't it?
It does, but here's where it gets really interesting for me. The source material then flips the script on the scientists a bit. It argues that science itself, the very tool the atheist uses to deny faith, is actually built on faith.
This is the faith of science.
Yeah.
And it's something we often gloss over because it feels counterintuitive. We assume science is purely objective, purely data-driven, standing on this unshakable bedrock of facts.
Right.
But science actually rests on a number of unprovable metaphysical assumptions.
Like what? Give me an example.
The classic one is the problem of induction. Or, put more simply, the sun rising tomorrow.
Okay. I'm pretty sure the sun is going to rise tomorrow. That feels like a fact.
You are, and I am too. But why are you so sure?
Because it rose yesterday, and the day before that, and every day for billions of years. The track record is pretty good.
That is called induction. You are assuming that the future will resemble the past. This goes back to the philosopher David Hume. He pointed out that you cannot prove that the future will be like the past without using circular reasoning.
How is that circular?
Well, if I ask you, how do you know induction works? And you say, because it has always worked in the past, you are using past result induction to prove the validity of induction.
You're using the thing to prove itself.
You're using induction to prove induction. It's a loop. You can't scientifically prove that the laws of physics won't suddenly and completely change in 5 minutes.
We'll just assume they won't. It's a pragmatic assumption.
We believe they won't. The uniformity of nature, this core idea that the laws of physics are constant across time and space, is a belief. It's a reasonable belief. It's a pragmatic belief. Science is literally impossible without it. But it is not a scientifically proven fact. It is a metaphysical assumption. It is the floor upon which the entire building of science stands.
So the atheist in the lab says, I only believe what I can prove, but they can't actually prove the logic they use to prove things.
Correct. The scientific method is a noble and powerful tool, but it is not self-justifying. So when the source material argues against the empty lab, it's saying, you are standing on a floor of faith. Faith in logic, faith in the uniformity of nature, faith in the intelligibility of the universe, to deny the existence of a higher faith.
That sets the stage perfectly for the next step. We've established that the lab tools might be limited. The ruler can't measure the dream. So if we put down the ruler, what are we supposed to look at?
The Quranic response is you look at the Ayat, you look at the signs.
And this requires a fundamental shift in perspective. We have to stop looking for, I guess, magic tricks and start looking at the mechanics.
That's a great way to put it. The source material makes a big point of this. It says the Quran doesn't primarily rely on miracles in the sense of breaking the laws of nature to prove God. It points to the laws themselves.
So a miracle isn't a violation of the laws of nature.
A miracle is the laws of nature. If you are looking for a miracle, don't look for the sun stopping in the sky. Look at the fact that the sun moves at all. Look at its predictable orbit, the fusion in its core. The regularity is the miracle.
So to go back to our intro, if the laws of physics are the sheet music, the reality we experience every day is the proof of the composer.
Precisely. God is the author of the laws, not a disruptor of them. The consistent, predictable functioning of the universe is the sign.
So let's take a tour of these signs. The book, The Quran and Atheism, lays out what it calls a tour of signs. And the claim is that these aren't just, poetic flourishes, they are empirical evidence reinterpreted.
And what's fascinating and a little bit startling is how some of these ancient verses align with very modern scientific discoveries.
Yeah.
It's what the source calls the empirical evidence reinterpreted.
Let's start big. As big as it gets. Cosmic. The Big Bang.
The source cites a verse from the Quran, chapter 21, verse 30. It describes the heavens and the earth as having been a joined entity. The Arabic word is rakku, which means sewn together, a single unit.
A joined entity. That sounds a lot like a singularity.
It does. And then the verse says that this single entity was separated or split asunder. The word is fatak. So you have a single joined reality that was then split apart.
I mean, the standard model of cosmology tells us the universe began as an infinitely dense hot point, a singularity that then expanded violently, the separation of the heavens and earth. It's a striking parallel.
It's very striking. And you have to remember, this is written in the 7th century when the dominant scientific and philosophical idea was that the universe was eternal, static.
Right. The static universe theory held on until Edwin Hubble in the 1920s, so describing it as having a beginning as an expansion from a single point is, well, it's noteworthy.
It is.
Okay, let's come a little closer to home. The sky itself. We look up and we see blue, we see emptiness. But the Quran, in chapter 21, verse 32, calls the sky a protective shield or a guarded canopy.
Which, from a scientific perspective, is exactly what the atmosphere is.
Yeah.
We tend to think of the sky as just open space, but it's actually a violently active shield.
How so? What is it shielding us from?
Well, think about what is out there in space. You have lethal UV radiation pouring from the sun. The ozone layer, a tiny part of our atmosphere, blocks almost all of it.
Okay.
You have the solar wind, which is a constant stream of charged particles that would literally strip away our atmosphere if it weren't for the magnetic field generated by our planet's core, which the atmosphere helps to contain.
And meteors.
And meteors. The mesosphere, one of the layers of the atmosphere, burns up tons of meteors every single day. They bombard us like cosmic buckshot, but the atmosphere incinerates them into shooting stars. Without this roof, life as we know it is impossible. We would be fried by radiation or pummeled by rocks.
So the sign here isn't just that the sky exists, it's that it functions as a specific multi-layered mechanism for protection.
Exactly. The function is the sign.
Moving from the sky to the ground, or rather, the water cycle. The source quotes Quran chapter 2, verse 164. It describes the water that God sends down from the sky as reviving the earth after its death.
The description of the water cycle in various parts of the Quran is remarkably accurate for its time. It talks about the winds fertilizing the clouds, the specific nature of rain reviving dead land, the process of evaporation.
But again, the sign isn't just that it rains.
No, it's the cycle. It's the perfect, renewable, self-sustaining nature of it. It's an engineering marvel on a planetary scale. The oceans are salty, but the sun evaporates fresh water, the winds carry it over land, it falls as rain, nourishes life, and flows back to the ocean. It's a desalination and irrigation system that covers the entire globe.
Okay, here's one that always surprises people when they first hear it. Geology, the mountains. Quran chapter 78, verses 6 and 7 describe mountains as stakes or pegs.
The Arabic word is atad, like tent pegs driven into the ground.
Right, and for most of human history, people just thought, oh, they're big piles of rock sitting on the ground. But modern geology tells us about the theory of isostasy.
Isostasy, it's a fundamental concept.
Yeah.
It's the idea that the Earth's crust, the lithosphere, is essentially floating on the hotter, denser mantle beneath it, the asthenosphere.
Right.
And just like an iceberg, where you only see the tip, but 90% of its mass is underwater, providing stability.
Mountains are the same.
Mountains are similar. They aren't just piles of rock on the surface. They have deep roots that extend downward into the mantle, sometimes for tens of kilometers. These roots are made of less dense continental crust, and they provide buoyancy and stability.
They anchor the crust.
They anchor the crust. The description of mountains as stakes that prevent the earth from shaking or shifting with us, which is mentioned in another verse, Quran 21.31, aligns perfectly with this geological function of stabilizing tectonic plates.
That is incredibly specific. Stakes. Okay, let's go from the mountains to the bottom of the ocean. Oceanography. The forbidding partition.
This is from Quran chapter 25, verse 53. It speaks of two seas meeting. One is fresh and sweet. The other is salty and bitter. And between them is a barrier, a partition they do not cross.
I've actually seen photos of this, where the Atlantic meets the Mediterranean at the Strait of Gibraltar, or where glacial meltwater meets the ocean in Alaska. You can see a literal line in the water. One side is dark blue, the other is a milky turquoise.
It's a real phenomenon.
Mhm.
Scientifically, it's often related to the picnic line zone. It's a density barrier. Differences in temperature, and especially salinity, create a layer where the waters don't immediately mix.
So they flow side by side.
They flow side by side for great distances, they brush against each other, but they retain their distinct characteristics. For a desert dweller in 7th century Arabia to describe the specific fluid dynamics of meeting bodies of water is, well, the book argues it's a sign.
Let's get smaller now. Biological signs. Let's talk about embryology.
This is a very famous one. It's in chapter 23, verses 12 to 14. It details the stages of fetal development with some very specific terminology.
Right, it starts from a drop of fluid, then a clinging substance.
The alaka, which can mean a leech, a suspended thing, or a blood clot, all of which are visually and functionally accurate for an early stage embryo. Then it becomes a muga.
A chewed-like lump. That's such a strange description.
It is, until you look at a photograph of an embryo at the somite stage of development, around 28 days.
What does it look like?
It looks exactly like a piece of gum that someone has bitten into. The somites, which will form the vertebrae, create these ridges that look precisely like teeth marks. The visual parallel is uncanny.
And it mentions the sequence, right? Bone formation before flesh.
It says the bones are formed first, and then the bones are closed with flesh, with muscle. Modern embryology confirms this sequence. Cartilaginous models of the bones form first, which then ossify and harden, and only after that do the muscles migrate from their cellular origins and wrap around them. The sequence is the key here.
Wow. Okay, and then the brain? The neuroscience sign? This one was completely new to me. Quran chapter 96, verse 16. It talks about the forelock.
The nasia, the very front of the head.
And it calls it a lying, sinning forelock.
Think about that for a second. Why the forehead? Why the forelock? If you were writing poetry about lying in the 7th century, wouldn't you say a lying tongue or a deceitful heart?
Yeah, of course. That's where lies come from, metaphorically. The heart and the mouth.
But the Quran specifically pinpoints the front of the head. We now know that the prefrontal cortex, the area of the brain sitting right behind the forehead, is the center of our executive function.
It's the CEO of the brain.
It is. It's responsible for planning, for judgment, for decision-making, and yes, for the act of lying.
Lying is a complex cognitive task, isn't it?
It's very complex. It requires planning and inhibition. You have to know the truth, decide to conceal it, and then construct a believable falsehood. That all happens in the frontal lobe. The impulse to deceive originates right there, behind the forelock. The Quran connects the anatomy, the forelock, to the behavior lying and sinning centuries before we had any idea what a frontal lobe was.
That is wild. A lying, sinning forelock. It's almost surgically precise.
And speaking of surgical, there's the mention of pain from chapter 4, verse 56. In a description of punishment, it talks about skin being burned and then replaced with new skin so that they may taste the pain.
That sounds gruesome, but what's the scientific point?
The science is in the nociceptors. We know now that the vast majority of our pain receptors are highly concentrated in the skin. If you suffer a 3rd-degree burn, one that goes all the way through the dermis to the underlying tissue, you actually lose the sensation of pain in that specific area.
Wait, really? A 3rd-degree burn doesn't hurt?
The burn itself destroys the nerve endings. The surrounding area with 1st and 2nd-degree burns hurts immensely. But the center of a very deep burn is often numb because the sensors are gone. The verse explicitly acknowledges that the skin is the seat of the pain. To feel it, you need the skin.
So we have this incredible stack of signs, from the edge of the universe with the Big Bang down to the nerve endings in our skin. And the expert synthesis here, the core argument of the book, is crucial. This isn't God of the Gaps.
No, not at all. God of the Gap says, I don't understand how this works, therefore God must have done it. This is the opposite. This is God of the mechanics. It says, look at how perfectly this works. Look at the intricate order. Look at the complexity. The regularity is the miracle. The fact that the universe follows these elegant, discoverable laws that are stable enough for us to build a civilization on, that is the intervention.
It's like looking at a self-driving car. An ancient person might say, it's magic, there's a spirit moving it. We don't say, there's no driver because I don't see hands on the wheel.
Exactly.
We say, the fact that this car is navigating traffic, stopping at red lights, and parallel parking itself is definitive proof that there is an incredibly intelligent programmer behind it.
The code proves the coder. The symphony proves the composer.
But, and there is always a but, isn't there? If the signs are so clear, if the biology and the geology and the cosmology all point to this composer, why is it still subtle?
Right.
Why do we have to dig for it? Why isn't it just obvious to everyone? Why not just write Allah in the stars in giant neon letters and be done with it?
And that question brings us to section 4, the paradox of proof. Why is God hidden?
Yeah. I mean, if he wants us to believe, make it undeniable, make it like gravity. I don't have to choose to believe in gravity. I drop a pen, it falls. It just is.
But that's the entire point, isn't it? If God were as obvious as 1 + 1 = 2, or as undeniable as gravity, faith would cease to be faith.
It would just be knowledge.
It would become knowledge. It would be a reflex,
Yeah.
a compulsion.
And in that transition, we lose something important.
We lose ikhtiar. We lose meaningful free will.
Explain that connection. How does obviousness cancel out free will?
Okay, imagine a teacher giving a final exam. If the teacher stands over your shoulder and dictates the answers to you, or if the answers are printed in bold on the chalkboard at the front of the room, is it really a test?
No, of course not. It's just dictation.
Does the student have a meaningful choice to get it wrong? No. And if they get it right, do they deserve any praise or credit for it?
Not at all.
The source material argues that this life is a crucible for the soul. It is a test. Not so much a test of intellect, but a test of the will. The law of creation, the fitra, our innate disposition, gives us the intellect to scan the signs and see the evidence, but it deliberately leaves us the will to accept or reject them.
So the hiddenness isn't a bug. It's a feature.
It's a necessary precondition for moral agency. If God's presence was overwhelming, blinding, fiery might, as the text says, you would be coerced into belief. You would bow down not out of love or trust or a rational recognition of truth, but out of sheer terror or inevitability. You would be a robot.
It would remove the moral dimension from the choice.
Completely. That reminds me of the verse from the Quran, chapter 18, verse 29.
Which one is that?
It says, let anyone who wishes believe, and let anyone who wishes disbelieve. And another from chapter 76. We guided him to the way, be he grateful or ungrateful. The option to be ungrateful must exist for the gratitude to mean anything.
So if I have no choice but to believe, my belief is worthless. It doesn't say anything about me, about my character.
Precisely. This is where the source introduces the theological concept of emrain, which translates to the way between two ways.
That sounds like a martial art, the way between two ways.
It's a theological sweet spot. It's the idea that God is hidden enough to allow for genuine disbelief, which preserves your freedom to say no. But he is manifest enough through the signs, the ayat we just discussed, to make belief rational, which preserves your accountability.
They call it epistemic distance in philosophy.
Yes, that's the perfect term for it. We need that distance for our choices to have weight. The source material puts it beautifully. A less developed humanity would exist if God were plainly seen. Moral choice, real love, real gratitude, they all require that space to be chosen freely. We are hostages to what we have earned, as another verse says. You can't earn anything if you're forced.
So the silence of the lab isn't an empty void after all. It's the hush of the exam room. It's the space that's left for you to fill with your answer.
That's a very powerful way to put it.
Let's switch gears. We've done the emotional and the observational. Let's get logical. Let's get into some pure intellect. Section 5 is what we're calling the intellectual duel. And this is a heavy hitter. The Kalam cosmological argument versus quantum nothingness.
This is where ancient Islamic philosophy goes head-to-head with modern theoretical physics. It's a genuine clash of titans.
Let's start with the Kalam. This is most famously associated with Al-Ghazali, the 11th century theologian, right?
Yes, he was one of its most powerful proponents. The argument itself is deceptively simple. It has 3 short steps.
Okay, lay them out for us.
1. Everything that begins to exist has a cause.
Seems reasonable. Things don't just pop into being for no reason.
2. The universe began to exist.
Which we now know from the evidence for the Big Bang.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
3, therefore, the universe has a cause.
Logic 101. If the universe had a birthday, someone had to light the candles. It follows.
And Al-Ghazali went deep on this. He argued against the idea of an infinite regress, the notion that the universe has just been here forever, with cause after cause stretching back into infinity.
Why is that a problem?
He argued logically that you can't have an actual infinite number of past events. It leads to logical contradictions. Think about it. If there were an infinite number of days before today, we never would have reached today. So there had to be a first, a starting point.
And that first cause must be special. It must be different from everything else.
It has to be. If it created space and time, it must, by definition, be outside of space and time. So
Right.
it must be spaceless, timeless, immaterial, uncaused, and unimaginably powerful.
Which sounds a lot like a classical definition of God.
It does. Ex nihilo. Creation from nothing.
Enter the modern challenger, the physicist Lawrence Krauss. He wrote the very popular book, A Universe from Nothing.
A very popular and controversial book.
And his argument is basically, hold on, theologians. We don't need a cause. Physics can handle it. He argues that nothing is inherently unstable, that you can get a universe out of a quantum vacuum without needing a deity to light the fuse.
He calls the quantum vacuum a seething brew of virtual particles.
So does Krauss kill the Kalam argument? Does modern physics make the need for a first cause obsolete?
Well, this is where the intelligent scholar, as the source material calls them, steps in to referee this duel. And the rebuttal is, frankly, devastating.
Yeah.
It all turns on the definition of a single word.
Nothing.
Nothing.
Define nothing. Seems easy enough.
For Al-Ghazali and for philosophy for millennia, nothing means no thing, absolute non-existence. No matter, no energy, no space, no time, no physical laws, no potential.
Okay.
Think of it like this. There's a difference between a bank account with $0 in it and no bank account at all. The $0 account is a thing, a structure with the value of zero. Philosophical nothing is no bank account. It's not even a bank.
Okay, got it. Absolute non-being.
But for Lawrence Krauss, the physicist, his definition of nothing is a quantum vacuum.
And a quantum vacuum is not nothing.
Far from it. A quantum vacuum is a field of energy. It's governed by the complex and elegant laws of quantum mechanics. It has structure. It has potential. It is very definitely something. It's the bank account with $0, not the absence of a bank.
So it's a bait and switch.
It's a classic equivocation fallacy. Krauss is using the same word nothing to mean two completely different things. He's saying, I can show you how the universe came from this pre-existing, rich, law-governed energy field. And that's fine. That's interesting physics.
But it doesn't answer the original question.
Not at all. The philosopher then asks, okay, that's great, but where did your quantum field come from? And more importantly, who wrote the laws of quantum mechanics that govern the vacuum?
Even if you say the universe popped out of a quantum hat, you still have to explain the hat and the rabbit, the laws of magic that allow for rabbits to pop out of hats.
Exactly. Krauss explains the mechanism. He explains the match strike. Look, friction plus a combustible tip creates fire. But he completely ignores the agency, who struck the match, and he ignores the teleology why light the fire in the first place.
Teleology, that's purpose, right?
Yes. Physics is brilliant at explaining the how of the mass strike. It is constitutionally incapable of explaining the why, and simply redefining nothing to mean a really complex, invisible, law-governed something doesn't solve the ultimate mystery of existence. It just pushes it back one step.
So the ultimate question remains, why is there something rather than nothing? And why is that something so rigorously ordered by laws that we can comprehend?
And that brings us full circle, right back to the start. The order, the laws, the symphony.
So let's bring this all home. This has been a huge journey. We started with a lonely beep in a clinical lab. We ended up floating in a quantum vacuum. What does this all mean for you, the listener?
I think we've traveled a long way. From the empiricist's demand for a certain kind of data to the rationalist's interpretation of a different kind of data, the science. We've seen that the empty lab might just be empty of the wrong kind of evidence.
It's not that the evidence isn't there, it's that we're showing up with a ruler and trying to weigh a poem.
Right. And for me, the key takeaway is the need to distinguish between two types of naturalism. This is really critical for navigating this conversation.
Okay.
On one hand, you have methodological naturalism. This is what scientists do every day. When you are in the lab, you assume natural causes for natural phenomena. You don't say God did it when your test tube changes color. You look for the chemical reaction. That's good science. It's essential.
But then there is metaphysical naturalism.
Yes, and that is a very different thing. That is the philosophical belief, the worldview, that nature is all there is, that there is no supernatural. That is an assumption. It's a belief system, not a scientific finding.
So you can be a scientist without being an atheist.
Of course, you can be a methodological naturalist, studying the painting with a microscope, without being a metaphysical naturalist, denying the existence of the painter.
You can study the art and still acknowledge the artist.
In fact, the source material argues that the more you study the art, The more you learn about the breathtaking complexity of the cell, the vastness of the cosmos, the geology of the mountains as stakes, the more rational it becomes to believe in the artist.
So the Quranic perspective isn't asking for a blind leap in the dark. It's asking for a rational journey in the light. Look and ponder, it says over and over.
It's an invitation. The universe is the evidence, the book is the guide, and your intellect is the tool.
So here is the final thought we want to leave you with. It's a bit of a provocation, something to mull over.
Okay.
We talked about the silence of the universe, the hiddenness of God. If the hiddenness of God is actually a necessary requirement for your free will, if the teacher has stepped out of the room so you can take the test honestly,
Then the ultimate question is,
does that silence feel like an empty void? Or does it feel like a question waiting for you to answer? Is the silence an absence? Or is it a space created for you?
and what will you fill it with?
Think about that. Look at the signs. And listen to the symphony. I'm your host.
And I'm your expert.
And this has been The Deep Dive. Thanks for listening.